And Casey will just keep admitting people as they come in.
Carmen, is everything, you can hear us loud and clear, and you can got clear video and all that stuff?
I can hear you loud and clear, and everything looks good on my end, so I think we can probably get started.
Okay, we'll go ahead and leave it to you. Diana or Casey or somebody else, are you able to admit people?
Casey is.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. And Casey, if you'll just please do that for us, and then we'll just let Carmen go get into it.
All right.
Will do.
Good morning. Yeah, perfect. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Tourism Coalition of South Dakota, I'd like to welcome our tourism industry members from across the state who are joining us. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to Governor Rhoden and gubernatorial candidate. And I see that Tony is there as well. The purpose of today's virtual Q&A, first of all, is to give the stakeholders an opportunity to learn more about the governor's vision for tourism. And secondly, to provide an opportunity for the governor to hear our questions and views on some issues that we're facing in our industry. Before I begin, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the importance of tourism in South Dakota. Our 2025 numbers, we welcomed over 14 million visitors last year, and these visitors spent over $5 billion in our communities across the state.
Carmen, yeah, could you pause just a second? Everyone else except Carmen, please mute your microphones.
Please mute your mics, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so I was just going over the stats from 2025 again, just to remind everyone about the importance of tourism across the state. We welcomed over 14 million visitors to the state last year, and those visitors spent over $5 billion in our communities. This generated about $455 million in state and local tax returns, and it supported roughly close to 60,000 jobs. And it saved the average taxpayer household in South Dakota a little over $1,100. So the other thing is 80% of the businesses that are involved in tourism in the state of South Dakota are considered small businesses. So this is truly a mom and pop industry across the state. So today's conversation is intended to focus specifically on tourism issues, and questions were submitted in advance, but we compiled those questions into like topics so that we could get as many questions asked as possible. So joining us today as our moderator is TCSD's legal counsel, Justin Smith. And so with that, we'll turn it over to Justin and we'll get started. Thank you.
Larry and Tony, thank you both for being here. The camera will be focused on you the entire time. I've got a face for radio, so we'll just do that instead. So I can't thank you enough for your time. I know how busy you are. We were talking before the call started. The legislative session for both of you seems like a year ago because of how busy you've been for the last 3 months. So can't thank you enough for that. I'm just going to ask you some questions on behalf of TCSD that come from members. Starting with, as Carmen said, tourism continues to be one of South Dakota's largest industries, welcoming 14.9 million visitors in 2025 and generating about $5.09 billion in visitor spending and $455 million in state and local sales tax revenues, and saving the average South Dakota household a little over $1,100 annually in taxes. As governor, what is your vision for South Dakota's tourism industry over the next decade? And what opportunities do you see for continued growth?
Okay, well, I will take first step at that. Obviously, you know, I'm kind of an open book. I've served 16 years in the legislature, 6 years as lieutenant governor. Now, this year, second session that I've been governor, and so we've worked on a number of tourism issues through those years. Of course, I live just outside of the Black Hills, so the tourism industry is near and dear to me. And I will say, though, it's been It's been a great experience. Just
Hey, everybody needs to mute your microphones, please. Sorry, Larry, go ahead.
I'm going to talk to you.
Okay.
I don't like talking to a
Don't over this guy.
screen. But I've had 20-some years experience working with the tourism industry, working with Jim Hagan, who, by the way, I'm preaching to the choir, obviously, or preaching to the preachers when I say what an asset Jim Hagan has been to our state and to the tourism industry. And for me, I think that's probably the biggest testimony for me as far as where my heart lies with tourism is I rely very heavily on Jim Hagan and his wisdom, his experience. He was on Christy Nome administration for the last couple of years, was on our executive team to elevate his opinion. But I work very closely with Jim on a lot of stuff. Growing up outside the Black Hills, obviously the tourism industry is so large up there. But it's been a huge learning experience for me, especially the last couple of years as governor and less or so as lieutenant governor and as legislator, just to get across the state and get to know South Dakota better and realize that it's not, when you think tourism, especially if you come from West River, you think Black Hills, Mount Rushmore. But the more I've got around the state, especially in the southeast, all the attractions, the state parks, zoo park, and then you look at the numbers, and I think the southeast and the Black Hills region are pretty equally divided. We're really close to $4 billion or $2 billion in both locations, the numbers. So I fully understand the importance of tourism, and even more so coming from the University of Agriculture, and I've talked about that a lot. As an ag producer, I talk all the time that ag is our number one industry. And I used to say it's 8 times larger than our number 2 industry, which is tourism, just by the raw numbers. And I had to adjust my numbers a year ago and went from 8 to 1, now it's 7 to 1, because tourism has grown that much, even with the cattle prices. But I say that because as a governor in an ag state like South Dakota, we are so heavily reliant on ag that it emphasizes to me the importance to promote other fields of industry. And tourism is the next area that we look at for economic development, economic prosperity in South Dakota. So that'll always be at the top of mind for me. And the visions, I rely on the people around me. I'm proud of the fact that I want to put people that are smarter than me in the room around me on specific fields of expertise like tourism. And Jim Hagan is at the top of the list on that, and sharing my visions and having him share his visions with me. And from my personal experience in state government, figuring out how best we can do that.
Okay.
More often than not, it's keeping government out of your way.
That's great. Anything to add, Tony?
Oh, I was just sitting here thinking, I remember when Governor Dugard was taking office and we were recruiting Jim Hagan to be Secretary of Tourism. And we asked him to promise to stay for 2 years and hoped he would stay for 3. And so he's in his 16th year now in that job. And I certainly agree with the governor that I hope it's not his last. So he's been a wonderful asset.
I think, I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I think everybody on this call really appreciates hearing that. We truly have valued for the last 15 years. the partnership the tourism industry has had with Jim Hagan and his department. I think the staff is great, led by Jim. So appreciate you saying that.
I would add, you know, we're having this conversation as interviewing for the election, but I would add to that, just being palms up. I've tried to imagine South Dakota with Toby Dodd as governor. And quite frankly, and I'll be just honest, bluntly honest, that scares me a little bit. And it scares me a lot when it comes to industries like tourism, because he's talked a lot about repealing property taxes. And what was the main source originally? I mean, he's a moving target, but for a long time, he stood on the ground that he would do that, backfill the void in property tax dollars by taxing tourism. And you think about what that means in real terms. I mean, what he said originally, when I was listening to a podcast, I had to replay it so I could make sure I heard him right. And he made a statement of fact that, did you realize that 2/3 of our taxable tax receipts, sales tax receipts, come from out-of-staters? 2/3, he said.
It's crazy.
That is.
The reality is, I had just run the numbers on that with my half-cent sales tax, because I needed to know. The actual number was somewhere between 5% and 10%. I wanted it to be a big number, but Jim Twilliger said, well, you're stretching it at 10%. At any rate, regardless of the fact that he was wrong, the fact that that's his mode of operation is to tax them. If he was able to, even if it was true and he was able to get that kind of revenue out of tourism, if he taxed them to that extent, our number 2 industry would be non-existent a year later. So that's scary, and that's something to ponder.
Okay. So speaking of property tax relief, perfect segue, continues to be one of the state's top priorities. While tourism remains an important economic driver that supports businesses and communities across South Dakota, how do you believe South Dakota can pursue meaningful property tax relief while protecting the state's competitiveness as an affordable visitor destination and ensuring tourism continues to generate economic benefits for local communities?
Well, I assume that's referencing, you know, the counties that opt into the half-cent sales tax and the impact that'll have. I would speculate that it'll have zero impact on the tourism industry. I mean, do people stop at the border and say, they had a half-cent sales tax? No, they were this thing. And it's not like we're singling them out. That, you know, that's the big thing. We're not singling anybody out. The citizens are paying that extra half-cent. And I think it'll be a complete non-issue as far as tourism is concerned.
Well, and if you have someone who is price shopping tourist destinations that closely, which I agree with the governor has to be pretty rare.
They're spending anything.
Well, not spending anyway, but we still look pretty good in comparison to a lot of. I was just out in Maryland a couple of weeks ago, and I think their base sales tax rate was almost 10%, and then you're paying a tourism hotel and on. So,
yeah, that was another point I want to bring up is, you know, we talk about our taxes, even sales tax, which is our main, our main revenue source in South Dakota. But even with considering that and the fact that we have no income tax in South Dakota, we're still right in the middle of the rankings as far as sales tax at 4.5%. So when you start considering that relative to my opponent, some of the numbers he's throwing out, they just don't add up. You know, that was his other source of revenue. When he switched off of tourism, he was going to fund it by finding these hundreds of millions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse in South Dakota. We overlay that with the fact that we have consistently for over 30 years now been the lowest or second lowest tax state in the nation. Sales tax right in the middle of the punt, but even on property taxes, we're, I think, 8th lowest in the nation for property tax, even where we're at right now.
So I'll go a little bit off script here and follow up with the question, because I think it's going to be important as the property tax debate continues. First, do you think next year, 2027, and maybe a few years after that, the property tax rates in South Dakota will continue to be a legislative or citizen issue? And then second part, if so, do you envision any further initiatives, legislatively or otherwise, to have property tax savings for South Dakotans?
Well, I would respond to that this way. 2 years ago, when property tax became more and more prevalent issue, it was the result of Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, Pennington County. Those were the big three that really got kicked in the teeth. And I was saying last year that we have a sound system, but the ship was keeling to the left pretty hard because of the pressures that were put on in 3 or 4, 5 counties in the state. So in the short term, we needed to stop the bleeding. So that was Senate Bill 216 last year that I carried to cap the growth. But I said then that I felt like the problem was already starting to resolve itself in some areas as the housing market was getting softer. And this year, when we had, the half-cent sales tax, when that got down to the finish line as far as getting the votes, I won't name the legislators, but Sioux Falls legislators, that I didn't get their vote because their property tax had already been taking some major reductions. And the same is happening at a slower pace in Rapid City, but the housing market's starting to adjust. And that's what I predicted would happen, that those sales would start, supply and demand would get back in order, and we'd see a more stable system, a more fair system across the board. So that's kind of the beauty of the half-cent sales tax. County can opt into it. If it is no longer a problem down the road, they can do away with it. In the meantime, we'll have the property tax relief that's statewide with the 0.3% sales tax revenue going to that area.
And that statewide relief, your house is valued at $325,000. You save $547 a year as kind of scale. So that will be a bit of a release valve for the whole issue, I think. And then, as the governor said, there's the local option to go beyond that if it's a problem in that area. But I think we do hope that maybe that's an issue that'll cool down a little bit now for a few years.
Fingers crossed. So South Dakota has earned a national reputation for effective tourism marketing through Travel South Dakota, whose work is funded primarily through the dedicated 1.5% tourism tax, rather than general fund appropriations. How do you see the role of Travel South Dakota evolving? How would your administration continue working with destination marketing organizations, chambers, attractions, regional tourism groups, and local communities to keep South Dakota competitive?
Well, there again, I'm not the resident expert on tourism and what they're doing and what's working. But I know the people that are equipped to run those programs and to advise me. And I felt very comfortable in my years as lieutenant governor and governor in the council that we've got from the tourism industry. I don't know how many folks on this call that I've known personally, but through the years, a great relationship with our tourism folks, and I'm just very comfortable, and I hope that you're comfortable that I have sought counsel when decisions come up, and just like some of the programs that we reinstated last year, the folks at the TAP Tourism Advertising Promotion Grant that we reinstated last year, I think that's an example of my heart to help our tourism industry not just survive, but prosper and expand.
And we appreciate your administration's work this year on the airport funding bill. We considered that as the tourism industry to be a huge success, and appreciate the partnership. We're glad to help your administration to drive that over the finish line with the legislature. So we can't thank you enough on that. Tourism businesses continue to identify workforce availability, seasonal employees, workforce housing, airports, and transportation infrastructure as some of their greatest challenges. What initiatives would your administration prioritize to help tourism businesses address workforce shortages, support seasonal workforce programs such as H-2B and J-1 visas, strengthen air service, and improve the overall business climate for tourism?
Well, I think that's for me, it's relatively easy to understand where my heart's at, especially in the field of agriculture, which has been my wheelhouse. So we have exactly the same interests. The tourism industry and agriculture, I think, is more reliant on those programs to bring immigrant labor into our state, and how much we rely on that. So we will continue to keep a close eye on that, and any changes in those programs that are coming down from the federal level. On that front, I feel pretty comfortable in the relationships that I've built with our federal regulatory agencies. Work very closely with Rollins on a number of issues and different folks. It's been a breath of fresh air to have the kind of openness and responsiveness from the federal level that we've had for the last year and a half.
Yeah, it seemed like when President Trump came back into office, initially there was a real crackdown. You can see why that was, because it was becoming a real problem. But they started out very harsh and then are kind of working their way back into some of these programs to a more workable position. And I think given the mess that it was as he was coming in, you could understand why they took that approach. But we're in a better spot now, the immigration programs we were a year ago.
Well, I believe a lot of that is, he surrounded himself with some pretty good people. Brooke Rollins. In my conversations with her, I've come to believe that she's been a good influence on President Trump.
And one other topic I would mention, or one other angle to that answer, I'm chairing this task force on correction rehabilitation. And one of the things we were just talking about in our meeting last week on Tuesday was, and this is something that's come from the governor, that we really want to push to get the inmates out working again. Seems like the last few years that is part because of how they structured the wages, but also part for security reasons. There's been less of that, and we really want to go back to, we don't want these guys sitting around watching their little tablet thing all day. They need to be out working. And I know, thinking about the tourism industry, that helps some types of businesses more than others, but certainly here in Sioux Falls, I think the restaurant industry has benefited in the past from work release type labor, and might be a release valve in some areas anyway.
Communities across South Dakota continue looking for ways to invest in destination marketing or visitor experiences. One proposal being discussed is modernizing the municipal hotel occupancy BID, Business Improvement District statute, to provide communities with additional local options for tourism investment. Several years ago, I think it was 2023, may have been 2024, I can't remember. There was a bill that would have done the same thing, that made the legislature. Did not ultimately go into law. Well, I'll just say it. Governor Nome vetoed the bill. The legislature did not override the veto. But what are your thoughts on giving municipalities greater local flexibility to determine how they invest in tourism promotion and destination development with bills like that or similar options?
That bill was changing it from a dollar amount to a percentage, right?
I
So
believe that's right.
the idea was that if hotel rooms are really expensive and Dan wanted to wrap it or something, that the take would be higher.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Well, that's a tough question to answer when anytime you're asked to speculate on taking a position on, just ideas for legislation, the devil's is always in the details. So I don't know what to tell you to that other than, like I've said before, I'm an open book. You've seen how I process these kind of problems. As an example was this year when I met with city officials in Deadwood. And we ended up with, what was the bill number? We ended up with
Well, it
1.2 bill 1.2, I believe.
It changed how the gaming revenues are split up.
Yeah,
Great bill. Tourism Coalition supported that one and testified in favor. Great bill.
and we supported it, testified, and I signed it into law. So I hold that up as an example of, we're going to work with tourism to the best of our abilities on ideas and proposals to help that industry.
And I would, I think here again, I'm not putting the words in your mouth, but I think you've shown that your willingness to leave some of these decisions on controlling some of these budgetary and other issues to the locals, to the cities, to the counties. Example would be this year, your bill that gave them the ability, we talked about it already, gave them the ability to put the half penny increase to sales taxes into effect.
When we talk about the municipal tax, I'm sure tourism had some interest on that legislation as well.
I can't remember, Carmen, if we took a position on the CAPS bill, was that House Bill 1245?
I don't believe that we did. We were monitoring it and everything, but I don't think we took a position on it.
Yeah.
245.
Yeah, 245, that's right. And we know that, the chambers all supported that bill, economic development people supported the municipal league. Certainly, I think, just putting on my chamber hat, there's going to be communities that use that to fund attractions that will benefit the tourism industry.
And certainly, if you talk to Mayor Tenhaken about it, I think he was the principal promoter of that for years. And I think he got the idea from Oklahoma City. If you go to Oklahoma City, which I did a couple of years ago, that is very clearly how they have used it. So they built a baseball stadium and they built, of course, they're a much larger city than anything we have, but they've built some pretty significant tourism amenities or attractions in Oklahoma City program. So
Nope, that's where I went to law school and spent 3 years in Oklahoma City in their Bricktown area downtown. It's absolutely beautiful.
exactly.
So Governor, South Dakota's outdoor recreation opportunities such as hunting, fishing, arts, culture, heritage attractions, community events are major reasons visitors choose our state. How can state government continue supporting these assets while working collaboratively with outfitters, guides, local communities, and tourism businesses to ensure South Dakota remains a premier destination?
Well, kind of a generic answer, but I think it's fitting is, the best thing government can do for those type of businesses is stay out of their way, especially in those type of businesses. Looking at states that are heavily regulated. And so I think number one is stay out of their way. There are opportunities as far as legislation or laws in the books that might be prohibitive in some way. And that's also, I think, a commonality with agriculture. And on agriculture, I think also we've got some commonality as far as our interests with agritourism. You know, that's getting to be a bigger deal all the time. You know, the hunting, fishing, the opportunities that are available in South Dakota that we kind of take for granted as far as our tourists and having a real life experience with a ranch operation, or even like Brent Hoffman, brother owns Black Hills Ammo. When he started test firing ammunition for his brother on his cattle ranch at Two Rivers Ranch, where my mom was born and raised, log cabin. I don't know how many years ago he ended up selling the cows, built a lodge, and makes his living shooting prairie dogs. It makes a better living there than he did off cattle. Of course, I don't know if that's true now with the cattle market, but you know, we've seen a lot of that you never would have expected in South Dakota. Kind of I don't know, drifted off.
Oh, no, that was perfect. Along those lines, government staying out of the way of the private sector, there have been, again, a little bit off script here, but there have been some bills in the last 2 to 3 years introducing here that for the first time would require hunting and fishing guides to be licensed and regulated by GF&P. Tourism Coalition has opposed those, along with a long list of hunting and fishing guides. I think this year the GF&P testified against the main bill that was introduced. What's your thought on requiring the hunting and fishing guides for the first time to be licensed and regulated by GF&P in South Dakota?
Well, it goes to what I just said as far as government, more limited government and staying out of the way. I understand, there's some need of protecting our consumers and whatnot, but it's not been demonstrated to me that there was a problem that needed to be fixed. And so I'm not interested in trying to create a problem so we can pretend that we're fixing it.
Throughout your public service, you work closely with South Dakota's tourism industry. Looking ahead, what messages would you like to share with tourism businesses, employees, community leaders, and local governments about your commitment to supporting one of South Dakota's most important industries? And how, this is the second part, can the tourism industry best partner with your administration to continue growing tourism across the state?
Well, I don't, that's a tough question to answer because I think we've done, when I think about tourism and our tourism conference, when I look back the last few years since the start of the Noam Rhoden administration, if I think back farther when I was in the legislature and some of the issues that I had, with big picture tourism, I thought, that I want to go into some of the stuff that I thought we could improve on because we have. And I am really comfortable with the relationship between the governor's office and our tourism industry. And I will say this, if there's areas that we need to improve on, or that people have ideas for me, I've told you what my mode of operations be from day one is openness, responsiveness, and civility. And I think I've lived up to that commitment. And I will continue to follow that line of operation. You got a problem? Give us a call. I inherited, well, I didn't inherit it. I helped create it as lieutenant governor. I think the best governor's staff, the governor's team that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm not disparaging any former administrations, but I've got a great pool of talent, people whose hearts are in the right place and that got hearts of service for people, for our state. And so I'm comfortable when I say, you got a problem with us? Come talk to us, we'll figure it out, or an idea for improvement.
I just hope wherever she is, Deb Bowman wasn't listening in when you said that.
Well, thank you.
So again, going a little bit more off script, the last 2 years in particular, we've seen some legislative attacks or attempted attacks on economic development and initiatives like the Future Fund, tax increment financing, some other stuff. The Tourism Coalition for the last 2 years helped to lobby against the bills going after the Future Fund and GoEd. And then we got involved for the first time this year in helping to fight against the bills that were going against TIFs and other forms of economic development measures. Do you see those attacks continuing in the legislature beginning in 2027? And if so, how do you envision your administration working with the legislature and the private sector groups to combat those kinds of initiatives?
Well, a couple points on that. Elections matter, and we just went through an election and we moved the needle a long way in restoring some sanity. You look at the people the incumbents that lost, there were a lot of them that were in Mr. Doden's camp. There's like 80% of them were legislators that were backing Mr. Doden. And I say that to only emphasize the fact that was the core of some of that real extreme type attitudes, anti-economic development. There were others that kind of skirted the fringe on that. But that's one point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make is the fact that, I inherited that group 2 years ago in my first legislative session. When I took the reins 3 weeks into session, I was dealing with that group. You look back, we had some terrible fights and some really bad ideas floating around. But at the end of the day, we came out both of them sessions in pretty good shape. And I will say that I think a lot of that credit's due to the governor's office, because we worked hard. It was like we were stuck in the middle of a tornado from day one on session, like this year, especially this year with, then you had all the camps that were trying to lob grenades into our camp on everything we tried to do. And we still got it done. We did it by building relationships with people in all three camps. And so I'm pretty optimistic. Now we've restored a little more sanity. I think it'll just make our job easier. And we won't be, we'll always have our issues and our fights, but nothing to the extent I think we've had for the last 2 years.
I would just mention kind of a different way of cutting how did the primary change the legislature, but when we had the special session to approve the new prison last fall, there were 18 no votes in the House. 18 people voted no. Of those, only 3 of them are returning to the House. Did you realize that? The rest of them either didn't run again or got beat.
And that was the purest litmus test there was.
Right.
For legislators.
And of course, Toby Doden was very, very vocally working against that bill, but he earlier on was very vocally against all these economic development programs too, and we can't do this and whatever. But now I don't know how many personality transplants one guy can have in a year, but you never know if you're going to hear from Donald Trump or Santa Claus, just depending on the name. But now his whole plan is to grow the economy, but then he's opposed to everything that would actually grow the economy. So who knows even how to interpret this guy?
It's so ridiculous. We both, I don't know if any of you were at the state convention, Republican convention this weekend, but on Friday night, we both had 15 minutes forum. He spoke first, I spoke. He talked at length, has all the statistics that he manufactures, but the one thing he said that really struck me is recidivism. Our terrible track record on recidivism. And when I spoke, I did address that. I said, yeah, our recidivism rate is larger than it should be. We're not that much out of line with other states, but we can do better. And we're going to do better. And it says, it seemed the irony was so rich to me because he had went to desperate lengths to try and kill that prison deal from going through. And that is the key to success, is having a facility where you can actually administer a rehabilitation programming. And like I told the group, we've got a prison where they're stacked 3 deep, where 3 people do a bunking in a room that was built for 1. And so that's just another example of just the absolutely aggravating criticisms to his own plan. It just changes daily, hourly.
Well, and I'll give you an example that the Tourism Coalition greatly appreciated, along the lines of legislative success that the governor's office under your administration has definitely contributed to. And that would be the bill in 2025, 2 bills that would have repealed the sales tax exemption for advertising services. And that bill was vigorously opposed by the Tourism Coalition, chambers of commerce, and other groups across the state. Your administration came up, the Department of Revenue did a phenomenal job in giving numbers, talking about the history of where that came from and why it would be a bad idea. So we really appreciated you helping us to kill that bill on the first committee. I think that kind of partnership in the last 2 legislative sessions has been greatly appreciated. Carmen, we are through the list of questions. Are there any questions from the group?
I just asked that in a chat. I do not see any. If there is anyone out there that has a question, you can unmute yourself and ask that question right now. It's early Monday morning, so maybe everybody's still just a little tired from the weekend. I don't see any other questions, though.
All right. Well, let me ask this before we wrap up here, because I forgot at the beginning, and I apologize. I should have given you an opportunity to. Everyone on the call knows who you are. They're familiar with your background and your experience. But if you want to introduce yourself and just give an overview of your campaign, where you see things going between now and July 28. If there are those on the call who want to send support your way in any form, whether it's volunteer or money, we're not, Tourism Coalition isn't endorsing anybody right now, but just wanting to have the opportunity to give an overview of who you are, where your campaign sits, what your priorities are between now and July 28th.
Well, I'll just say this, the primary was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And, but we made it through that. Right now, we're just focused on what's at stake for our state currently. And that's a huge motivator for me. I was born and raised in South Dakota, lived here on the same ranch my entire life, except when I was in the military, training there. That's one thing some people don't know about me, that I served 5.5 years in the South Dakota National Guard, made a living in agriculture my entire life, volunteer fireman my entire life, did a lot of community service, served on school boards, local committees, chaired a local cooperative. I say all that because I was raised with a heart of service for my community and country and state. And I think that's important. Too important, for me, I was the last guy in a 4-way race. And that was largely due to the fact that I wanted to know for certainty that I was the right guy for the job. And the prison vote and that special session was kind of a final hurdle for me to really feel and know in my heart of hearts that I had the ability to bring people together. And I think that was a clear demonstration of that, and that my motives were understood and supported and respected by people that I work with. And my ability to put the right people in rooms, solve problems, come up with solutions was there. And so I knew in my heart that I was the right guy for the job, and I'm more convinced now with what's left in the field. I try to just focus on what I do, but when I see what my opponent has presented, it scares the bejeebers out of me. And I'm going to work every day from now until election night on May 20 or July 28th to make certain that our South Dakotans are informed about where I'm at, where my heart's at. So love to have your help.
Yeah, and I would just add, tomorrow is the halfway point between the primary and the runoff. 4 weeks, and then another 4 weeks. So we've had a great 4 weeks, I think. We've been getting a lot of support. We have a big fundraiser here in Sioux Falls tomorrow night. I see some of you on the call here who are helping with that. But if you're interested in attending that, you can talk to Justin and he can get you the details on that. Of course, the biggest thing we need to do is get the vote out. And you can go to your courthouse any business day for the next month and just vote. It's one question ballot, so it's a quick deal, not like the primary where you had to vote on 87 different things. Please do that. Please encourage everybody you know to go do that. It was very heartening, even though we don't know if Sioux Falls is ever going to figure out who the next mayor actually is. The good thing about that runoff was that the turnout in this runoff fell down almost not at all from the primary, about 38,000 votes to 36,000 votes. So we've never had a statewide runoff in South Dakota, and the conventional wisdom was that the turnout would be a lot lower, but maybe not. In some ways, people seem more energized now than they did in the primary. I think because of the very stark contrast we have now between the two candidates. So if you want a yard sign or want to help with parades or anything else, you can contact me, 695-0777. Otherwise, anything, just get out and vote.
I'd give you my cell phone, but I know you already all have it.
Carmen, anything else?
I don't believe so. I don't see any additional questions. So yeah, I'd just love to thank you both for taking the time this morning and answering the questions that the industry has. And yeah, I appreciate the time.
Well, we appreciate you all taking time to be on the call.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.